We're here in Harrow East. It's Bob Blackman versus the rest. Let's see what Bob has to say and how he's going to pitch for this seat. Since 2010, Bob, you've been a member of parliament from this very constituency. Does it look very tough this time?
Well, it's obviously you have to look at the national opinion polls, but you also have to look at the data that we've collected locally and the support that we've generated locally, not just now during this election, but over the last 14 years. So the reality is that we're running this election on the data, as I say, but also the message that we've got, a very strong message of the delivery that we've been able to make in this constituency and the promise of further to come. So it means that we're talking about more money for our schools, including a special education and needs school that we've secured the funding from the government, more money for our hospitals where we've been able to secure extra funding for a local hospital, for new A&E beds, also money for our high streets to regenerate our high streets, very important. And then, of course, the record of investment in providing new schools, providing new medical facilities, providing new police on the streets to keep people safe. So a lot of this is emphasising what we've done and also the fact what we will do in the future. So yes, it's hard work. It's hard work talking to people. As I say, I've been walking probably 9 hours a day, talking to people, having those doorstep conversations with people, and people recognise me on the doorsteps, which is very important.
It's the last leg. What you see behind us is just this last stretch of leaflets, pamphlets that'll be going out. The door-to-door has begun. We saw one batch of them leave with these pamphlets. But what we're seeing also is one might not be unique for you, Bob, but it is quite unique for most of the Conservative Party members or candidates this time, where they are fighting as individuals more than as a party, where in the leaflets you'll see the individual's name highlighted and the party Conservatives only as a subtext. Is that because of the polls that Conservatives are not doing that well this time?
No, it's because most of us that are restanding have been MPs for a long time. So naturally, you talk about the work that you've done for the people in the area. So people have to remember whose name is on the ballot paper and the record of success. We are facing a series of candidates from other parties who've never done anything for anyone. So the key challenge here is, who can you trust? People that have done the work for you, or people that may be perfectly good people?
But that's for you. What I've seen in the other constituencies or with other leaders is certainly a shift and a change where you are looking at them emphasizing themselves. Is that because Conservatives are having a difficult time this time? I mean, polls are saying that the Labour is a way ahead in polls. So is that also something that that worries the Conservative camp here?
Well, I think what we should be looking at is opinion polls are always of interest. I've never met anyone who's been polled ever. So polls are one thing, but even those opinion polls have started to show. Yes, on Monday they showed the lowest Labour lead for 2 years. So the polls are starting to tighten, and as people make up their minds, and one of the things in this election which is unique is there are more people undecided than any other previous general election. So those people are going to make up their minds in the last few days, and I predict, and here's a prediction for you, people will go to those polling stations and say, ooh, this is a risk. I'm not going to take the risk. Vote for the people we know. And I suspect that the polls will be shown to be wrong. Now, I'm not going to say we're going to be returned with a similar majority that we had, but just as in India, where we saw the opinion polls showing a vast lead for the Prime Minister, all of a sudden it didn't turn out that way when people voted. So let's see what happens. You know, when the votes are counted, that's when you can tell what has actually happened.
So you're predicting a surprise. You're predicting maybe a continuity with reduced numbers.
What I'm saying is that the overwhelming majority that has been predicted by everyone for the Labour Party is not going to happen. And now we've seen what the final result is, but as everyone is saying, probably in this country, the government will be decided by 130,000 people choosing to vote in a particular way. Because after all, this is 650 elections, and a small number of people in each constituency can make a huge difference.
Okay. So it's going to be a close election. He's calling it, saying it is not going to be as the polls have predicted in terms of the large majority that they've given to the Labour. Having said that, you've heard a lot of references to India. It's Bob Blackman. He's a Padma Shri awardee, an Indophile, monitors India very, very closely. So we will talk about India-UK ties. But before that, over here, there's another world of Indian community in India that we are seeing within the United Kingdom. And that certainly has set, in a way, in the recent past, a basis for a certain amount of polarization, Bob. Let's talk about that. How have you seen an increase in polarization in the recent past, and how has that impacted the elections?
Well, we're talking about Harrow East now. 37% of the electorate are from India originally, or their families came from India originally. So obviously that's a big impact. Many of the people actually watching your TV programme will actually be living in Harrow East, yes. As you know. So the reality is that people have very close ties to India and what goes on in India. So yes, those relationships are important. There have been, unfortunately, and we're seeing it in our domestic politics here, a rise in factionalism between different people of different faiths. Now, Harrow East is one of those, is actually the constituency that has the greatest adherence to religious faith of any constituency. And one of the things I've done since I was elected is speak up on behalf of those marginalised groups, because unfortunately in the British Parliament, there's very few people do. Very few people actually speak up on behalf of Hindus. Certainly, virtually no one speaks up on behalf of Jains. And there are a few people that will speak up on behalf of Sikhs.
Right. Also Temple Run. We've seen how Starmer and Sunak both have gone to various temples and certainly wooing the Hindu vote bank. How important and critical is this Hindu-Indian vote bank? Well,
clearly, going back to 2010, the vast majority of British Hindus voted Labour. There's no question about that. 2015, it shifted to a majority voting Conservative. We went backwards a bit in 2017, but forwards again in 2019. And now the vast majority of British Hindus will vote Conservative. The reality.
You think they would? Because
yeah, they will.
Isn't there a shift now?
No, there's not a shift. I mean, I think one of the things that you need to remember is Hindu values align completely with Conservative Party values. We're very proud of the fact that Rishi is a practicing Hindu. He's gone, obviously, to Neasden Temple. We took him to Kenton Temple. He was received in rapturous welcome. I could say, in contrast, that our opponents turned up at Kingsbury Temple. Virtually no one was there. And in the photographs, there were no Hindus.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not a contrast, I don't know what will be.
Tell us about the photograph. It has done the rounds now. Starmer with a bunch of Indian origin people, but they're not Hindus?
No, they're Muslims. And they're Muslim councillors. So, look, you can fool people sometimes, but the reality is the people that view these will know what the position was. So from that perspective, it's a very foolish thing to do.
Okay. Coming back to the elections itself, Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister not through the general elections. This is the first time he's actually going to the people to seek votes. Do you think Britain is actually ready and prepared for an Indian origin Prime Minister?
Well, we'll see on the 5th of July. The reality is, obviously, Boris Johnson was, elected as Prime Minister. In this country, people vote for their MPs, and then the leaders of the party, if they're in the majority, become Prime Minister. Boris was obviously Prime Minister and brought down. Liz Truss didn't last very long, and Rishi took over at a very difficult time. He'd been Chancellor during the COVID and pandemic, and because of that, he'd made measures that protected employment, protected the British economy, and indeed probably rescued the British economy from disaster during that time. So he gets credit for that. He then inherited a position where Liz had tried to move too fast too soon. So he brought back stability. He's delivered on the economy, both in terms of bringing down the inflation rate, taking the measures we needed to take to bring inflation down. He's got growth into the economy. We're the fastest growing economy in Western Europe and in the G7. He's brought down, obviously, the debt marginally. There's a lot of work to be done on that. And indeed, hospital waiting lists, which is what we promised to do, have come down by nearly 600,000 over a 6-month period. In this country, normally during winter times, those hospital waiting lists go up. So yeah, they're still too high, but measures being taken to reduce them. The one issue that we've still got to resolve is stopping illegal migration across the Channel.
Two very important points. You just brought it up. I was going to ask you about illegal migration, and that certainly is a problem because in the debate, the last debate between Starmer and Sunak, while Sunak performed well, it was on the fact that when he countered Starmer on what are they going to do about illegal migration, and Starmer had this thing to say, this one thing, that Sunak has not been able to stop this illegal immigration at all. And that certainly, in fact, numbers have grown. That certainly is going to be a challenge. There are two challenges. One would be this. Secondly, he still has the Partygate scandal that people keep picking up and bringing up every now and again. No?
I can tell you, I've been out on the doorsteps for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and I do it generally, not come up once. I don't believe that will be an issue at all. I think the key issue here is, you say, illegal migration. We have a plan. We put through legislation that says now, if you come to this country illegally, you'll be detained. No, you won't be sent back. You'll be detained and then transported to Rwanda, where you'll be resettled. Now, the first planes are due to take off on July the 24th, if we're elected back to government. If there's a Labour government, they've said they'll cancel that. Now, the big challenge here is Labour talk about, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Everything they talk about, we're doing already.
Finally, to the India-UK relations and ties, you've travelled a lot to India. You've seen that there is now a continuity in government, but not in the same form. How do you then see, and we could see maybe should he be right and a Labour returns with a reduced majority, Conservatives return with a reduced majority, how will then India-UK ties really move forward? Are we then to actually hope for an FTA between the two countries? What really happens?
Okay. Well, obviously, I congratulate Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his re-election, albeit we're relying on, obviously, the coalition of parties that have been required. Clearly, if we're returned, that relationship between India and the UK will grow stronger and stronger. We need now to finish off the free trade deal, get that in place, which will be to the benefit both of the United Kingdom and India. I mean, we are, India is the third biggest investor in the UK. We are the third or fourth biggest investor in India. So from that perspective, we have a natural combination between the two countries.
Thank you so much, Bob Blackman, for joining us here on India Today Global.